Welcome to Collision, the podcast where we discuss the fun and sometimes complicated collision of real life and trusting God. If you're curious or confused about how to engage the world we live in, we hope our conversation here helps. Now, let's get into this episode of Collision.
All right, welcome to Crossroads Collision Podcast. I am Stu Jackson, and you'll note next to me is not Matt Manning this time. We kicked Pastor Matt behind the camera today. He came back from vacation, tired, blah, blah, blah. And we brought in Pastor Saul from Iglesia Victory.
That's right.
And for those of you that don't know, Iglesia Victory meets down at the North Glen Community Center.
Yes, sir.
And has been really successful from what I understand. I hear stories that may shock you. To bring me into a Spanish-speaking church, I'd just be lost. It'd be a lot of fun singing,
Yeah.
but that would be it. So, tell you what, Pastor Saul, while we're sitting here, why don't you give me a quick rundown on Iglesia Victory and how things are going, and just kind of give me the basic on who you are.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. It's exciting just to be here, and man, I'm excited just to be part of walking together with Crossroads. 3 years ago, God gave us the opportunity to just join with Crossroads vision, and it's an awesome way of how God has been just working in our lives. We were part of an English church, American English church, and we just saw that the opportunity of launching out and being our own independent church was coming to the opportunity of doing it. And so we saw the opportunity, but we didn't have a building, and that was in 2021, right after COVID. And so all the buildings were closed, and there was so many challenges. And we went to a hotel just a couple of blocks away from here to see if we could see the space to rent. And I really wasn't really happy about doing that because the breakdown and the tear down and all that, it was like,
put it back up, tear it all down. Yep,
absolutely. And I've done church planting before, so that's how my ministry started in New York. I was a church planter.
Wow, okay.
And so I really didn't want to go through that same path again. And while we were there, we finished up, and the space was a nice space, but they didn't have any classroom for the kids, and would have to bring the sound and break it down, and even the sound was limited. And so we decided to start looking. And while we were leaving the parking lot, the brother, one of the leaders that was going with me, said, "Hey, there's a big church that I always see every time I'm going past I-25. Do you want to go and see if they want to rent their space?" And in my mind, I'm going to be as open as honest. Like I was thinking, man, another white church. Come on. I was like, oh no. But I came in. I didn't want to say no because he was already just, he was there with me. So okay, might as well, let's go. And so we went. We came into the front office, spoke to the receptionist, and I said, "Hey, I'm interested in speaking to the pastor about renting the space."
Okay.
And during that time, that specific time, I mean, beautiful to see, look back and see the sovereignty of God and see how everything works under His plan. And you guys were, Crossroads Church was in the transition of seeing what to do with the space of 104th and Huron. And that was in the same time that I came to ask. Perfect. And so the lady, the receptionist said, "Oh, you must be talking about the 104th and Huron." Again, I didn't want to contradict her, and I had never seen 104th and Huron Crossroads Church. And so I said, yes. I'm like, yes. And I was like,
in fact, I am.
Yeah, perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. And after she took my name and my information, I told my friend who was with me, I said, "Let's go look at it." And we immediately, after the parking lot, we went directly to 104th and Huron, and we went in, and we stopped looking because we knew it was that was the place.
That's perfect.
I was like, man, this is perfect. It had everything. It had the space. And even though our group was only 50 people that was coming with me from the Spanish group that we had been able to build and invest in. We're like, man, it gives us enough room to grow. And we launched out in February of 2022.
Okay.
Our launching service was 347 of attendance.
Wow.
And now we are having around an average of 250 of attendance every week. And we see that about 400 consider Iglesia Victory their church.
That's fantastic.
In a 3-year span.
That is amazing.
It's been crazy, but
that is truly good. Now, you mentioned it a little bit in there that your previous calling was a church planter.
Yeah.
So give me an idea of how God said, "Hey, Saul, I want you to do this." So can you tell me how you found that?
Oh, well, I think throughout my life, I felt the calling to be a pastor. And then when I started, just searching what God had in my life and started identifying my gifts and my talents and just the love for the people, sure. I started kind of connecting the dots. And so there became an opportunity to do a church plant through the organization that I was in that moment to go and plant a church in New York City because there was a couple of families. My heart has always been the Latino community.
Okay.
And so when I married, my wife is Mexican. I'm Mexican American. I was born in the United States. I was born in El Paso, Texas, but my mom and my dad are from Mexico.
Okay.
And so I have kind of two cultures in my life, and so
sure.
I went to, high school, elementary, middle school, never lived in Mexico before I got married. And so all my American culture is very, very
sure.
grounded in me.
Yeah.
But I was born with my mom and my dad, and so their culture it's also part of me. So I have dual cultures.
Right.
And so when I start identifying my gifts, start identifying my talents, I say yes to that calling. And we went to Western New York. There's a small little town called West New York, which is 2 miles away from Manhattan.
Okay.
And it's on the other side of the Hudson River. And we started planting a church there, and it was an awesome experience, but it was so hard because I had never done church planting before. And that's when I got connected to it's a church planting network called City to City, who Tim Keller was the church plant, the main creator of that. And I was able to just, grow and learn. And so once my time in the church plant in New York came up, I decided to come back to Denver because this is where my brothers and my mom, my dad lived. And so we came back to Denver. And after a year, I was able to join this American church. And I was able to grow and be there for almost 5 years.
Okay.
But I was an associate pastor at this American church with the responsibility of the Spanish service.
All right. Okay.
And so that's where I started,
and that's where it all grew from.
That's all where it all grew from.
Now, you mentioned having the kind of dual cultures in your life. I've heard a little bit of the story, but I don't know all of it. And I know that your wife, Gabby, being a Mexican citizen, you experienced a side of that was pretty tough in your life. Can you give me that story?
Well, I always feel that God allows you to go through certain situations in life to be able to help that areas that you were able to to go through.
Sure.
Right. And so in my life, I was so lucky to meet Gabby at a church event in Mexico. So we went to a youth event. It was about 5,000 to 7,000 young people, and I met Gabby there. And then we came back and we started chatting and getting to know each other. And so Gabby lived in Mexico and I lived here in Denver.
Right.
And so after us meeting, we officially met in Phoenix, where Gabby has her family.
Okay.
She came to visit her cousin, and her cousin. That was the excuse.
Gotcha. Okay.
And when she came to visit her cousin, I went to visit her cousin. I went to meet Gabby, and then from there, I said, hey, before you go back to Mexico, why don't you come to Denver to meet my mom and my dad? And she said yes. And so she came to visit my mom and my dad to meet them for the first time. And that's where my mom offered her the opportunity to work where she was working at that moment. And Gabby stayed. And so Gabby stayed working here and living here. But Gabby was in and out through a visa. It was a tourist visa, right?
Okay. Oh,
and so she had the opportunity to be here, but she had to always go back and renew the visa and then come back and then be here for a couple of months. And so she was coming in and out through a tourist visa. Well, finally, we fell in love and we decided to get married. But Gabby's condition was if we get married, we have to get married in Mexico. And I said, sure. I mean, it makes sense. We're going to live here the rest of our lives.
Let's be honest. Most of the guys go, yeah, wherever you want to get married. I understand. Believe me, I understand.
And then it's Mexico, so it's a lot cheaper too.
Sure.
And so I said, yeah. So we went to Mexico to get married. We got married on October 6th, which was a Friday. And so the idea was to go on a honeymoon on Monday and come back to Denver. And then from here, Denver, go to our honeymoon so we could, get a round trip. And so we went to where Gabby's from. We got married on a Friday. Beautiful wedding. It was like a novella. Okay. I mean, the palm trees, the tuxedo, the flowers.
It's a movie. Pastor Saul got married in a movie.
Yes. And then that was Friday. And Saturday we had to return back to Denver on a nonstop flight. So that means that when you get here in Denver, then you go through customs here in the airport, right?
Right.
And we went through customs, and in customs, that's where they start asking for our information. And obviously, we had gotten married, but we hadn't submitted the paperwork for Gabby's transition of residency, right? And so she was still coming in and out through her visa, through her tourist visa.
Right.
But when she got into the immigration officer and started speaking, they realized that she had just gotten married, and she no longer was a tourist. She was the wife of a citizen, and there's a visa for that. So there's a visa for a wife of citizen, there's a visa for fiancés, there's a visa for girlfriends, there's a visa for students, there's a visa for...
there's like 190 different kinds of visas.
And so they denied her entry the day after our wedding. They denied her entry, and they put her in jail.
Put her in jail?
Yeah. So wow. Friday, she's wearing white. And Saturday, she's wearing orange.
I bet you she doesn't like that joke that much.
I still mention it. She's still like classic Grinch about it. But it was an immigration jail setup. And so they send her to that immigration holding cell.
Yeah.
And that's where our life started. That was our first day of being married.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now... she had to go back to Mexico. How long did she have to stay in Mexico?
And so she had to, so they denied her entrance. So that means she got deported. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, in God's grace and God's favors, always, even through our hardships, He's always there. Instead of holding her for 30 days, which is the traditional time frame, they send her on Monday. So she was only there Saturday night and Sunday night. And so on Monday, they deported her back to Mexico. And of course, since that was our time to be in our honeymoon, I ended up going back with her to Mexico.
Sure.
And so we spent a couple of nights in Mexico, in Cabo. It was funny because they deported her to Cabo San Lucas.
Well, there's worse places to go.
Oh, yes.
Okay, yeah. I'm pretty sure there's a beach there.
Yes.
Palm trees. Oh, okay, I guess.
So that's where we spend our honeymoon, a couple of days. And afterwards, my mind was, how can I fix this? How can I bring her back? And so we figured out that the consulate that gives permission or gives visas for couples and even gives emergency visas, and that's what my case was considered since I'm an American citizen. There was the possibility of getting a emergency visa.
Okay.
We went to that consulate, and that consulate was in Juarez, which is a border town to El Paso, Texas.
Yep.
And so after our couple of days in the honeymoon, we went to Juarez and we went to submit a emergency visa to see if they would give us, a year of a visa while our paperwork is processed. Well, they denied her entry. And so we had to come to the conclusion that she was going to go back to Mexico and stay in Mexico, and I was going to come back to the United States. But knowing that we were going to come back to Juarez because that's where the visas and the interviews and all the process go through that through that city, she decided to stay in Juarez. And it's a lot closer from Denver to Juarez. It's only a 10-hour drive.
Right.
And so I said, well, I could commit to coming once or twice a month and come and visiting you.
Sure.
That only worked for 6 months. After 6 months, she saw like, you know what, I'm going back. And she lives in Mazatlan. So that's that's like 24 to 30 hours of just a drive. And I say, you know what? You were already here 6 months. It's my turn. So I ended up moving to Mexico. And so we lived a total of about 2 years in Mexico.
Wow.
And so her transition, her paperwork took about a year and a couple months. And we just got so accustomed and kind of loved what God was doing in our lives. We ended up going to a small church and started participating in that small church, and we started seeing the growth in that church. And that's one of the ways we started identifying that God had a calling for me and my wife to work at a church and work in ministry. We thought it was missionary work, but we realized that it was more of the pastoral side of ministry.
I don't know. I've been to New York. I would count that as a missionary thing because you wouldn't find me living there. But that's just another story.
We just went to New York, and I asked myself, what in the world was I doing?
I don't know. I've visited. I don't ever have to go back. It's nice to look at in pictures. So let me ask this, because, being a pastor at a Spanish-speaking church, your experience with the whole immigration process, which unfortunately I'm sure is all too common with staff. How does that really affect your current ministry? I mean, what is that? How do you feel that in your current ministry? Because I'm sure there's a lot of challenges with it right now, given the current climate. But, where does that put you? Because personally, I try and balance the compassion of it all versus the law of it all.
Correct.
And so you just kind of give me a feel for what you think there.
Well, I think that the tension between getting stuck on just the lens of political policies, right, and looking at through the lens of just the law of the law of the what is it called, the rule of the law, without forgetting the side of the biblical perspective of compassion and neighboring and mercy and righteousness and so especially us going through it, it adds a different connotation to it. Sure. It just because you were part of it. You kind of have a feeling of what an immigrant family is going through. I had to, in my perspective, I had to leave my country and my family to be at Gabby's country, and to be there for 2 years and wait the process till they give us the permission to come back.
Now, did you have to travel back and forth to because I honestly don't know. Does Mexico have like a visa program that you had to go into?
No.
And get paperwork and all that stuff?
And not on the border town. So, so I ended up working in El Paso.
Yeah.
And I ended up working in El Paso during that time.
Okay.
And so I would travel to El Paso to work, and then I would travel back to Juarez. Okay. But it was I had to wake up at 4:30 to get the bridge at 5 to go through a process of an hour and 30 minutes just to cross the border every single day.
Wow.
For 2 years. And then same thing coming back. So that was that was part of the sacrifice.
Yeah, that would be a bit. You mean you didn't pull up to the bridge and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so."
No. Yeah, no. I mean, the good thing about going through the bridge is that you get to meet all the vendors. So you get to eat at the burritos and so that was the only perks about it.
That'd be the last thing I'd meet is all the burrito vendors and everything else. I'd be in a lot of trouble.
And then they would know you so much that they would actually, hey, don't worry about it. Just pay me next time.
Oh yeah, then it's really bad. I need a reason not to get a burrito. So I'm sure that you hear the arguments for and against immigration and all that stuff. So from the Bible, you look at things like Deuteronomy 10:19 says, "And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt." And so, you have that side of the argument. And yeah, I'll be honest, terrifying. I got on Google and I did some research. Terrifying, I know. I actually did something, but I wanted to look that up. I wanted to see what people are saying, because unfortunately in today's world, people can make the Bible say whatever they want it to say. So if somebody comes to you and says, this verse says we should love all foreigners, because we were, at one point, how do you respond to something like that from a pastoral perspective?
Yeah. Well, I as a Christian, and aside from the fact that I'm a pastor, I'm first a Christian, right?
Okay.
And so as a Christian, my faith is based on the biblical principles and biblical perspective. And so I cannot put aside the rule of the law, which Romans chapter 13 gives us, right? To obey the government and obey the law. But at the same time, I see it as a pair of glasses. I can't just see from one side of the lens without balancing the other side of the lens. So what the Bible says about submitting myself to the government, and how do I do that without leaving the other lens of the biblical principles of God's sovereignty and love for your stranger, and the justice and mercy and immigrant. And one of the things that I think we're missing is the opportunity for the missional opportunity, right? So you're having all these people. As a church, our obligation is to have missionaries and send people to all these different parts of the world to preach the gospel and be able to fulfill Matthew chapter 28, verse 19, right? But in this moment, in this climate, a lot of countries are coming to the United States. So I don't think we're taking the opportunity of being missional to the people that are actually coming to the United States and preaching the gospel to people that have never heard the gospel. And in the sovereignty of God we're kind of sometimes missing the opportunity of understanding that they're here. I don't have to go over there no more. And so there's a lot of countries that are coming to this place. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm gonna defend or go against what the rule of the law is, but maybe me knowing and taking advantage of the opportunity of having neighboring. There are immigrants that are passing through a process of immigration. How do I see them as people and not, as the term calls it, illegals, right?
Right.
And so I personally would want to call them by their name.
Okay. Yeah. You don't want to group them into a category.
Yes.
Illegals or immigrants. You want to go and you want to. They're a person.
Yeah. Call them Saul. I was in that process. Call them Gabby, because we were in that process. And I feel like that's the same thing God does. He doesn't call us by our sin, right?
Okay. Yeah.
He doesn't call us by what we did or what we went through. He calls us by our name. And he invites us to a whole different culture of loving and forgiving, and that doesn't mean that I have to be disrespectful to the law and order, but that means that I am living according to the biblical principles of what God has ordained me to live in, right? And so How do you live in those two worlds? Is the tension? How are you a Christian living those biblical principles? But how do you live also obeying and being obedient to the rule of law?
Wow. So when you were living down in Mexico with Gabby and going through that whole process of trying to, get her visa sorted out and do all that, you have an opportunity to look back now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you wish God would have been able to tell you? Because experience is an incredible teacher.
Yeah.
But in that time, you get to look back now and you get to see with a different set of eyes.
Yeah.
Especially coming from a pastoral perspective.
Yeah.
Because that tends to be more, pastors tend to have that understanding of caring for the person, not the outside, but the inside. So how did that experience teach you what people who are going through this need?
I think one of the things that I learned is precisely what you're doing right now is learning their story, right? How many times I've had the opportunity to learn, to be able to speak about my story, and now you become more of an open dialogue, right? Where it's not what I think about immigration and immigration policies, but it's what is your story and what are you going through? And one of the things I learned while I was there and we're going through that process is I was able to understand their struggles. I understood why they wanted to come to America. I mean, Gabby tried to work over there and she was getting $10 a day.
Wow. Okay.
And so that was one of the perspectives that I was able to, I had never lived in Mexico, so I didn't even know how much they were paying.
Right.
And so just to learn those perspectives and realize what that meant to live in a country where they pay $10, $20 a day, it's like, wow. Usually that's how much you make here, an hour.
Yeah. And to have that for a day, that's...
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I can't imagine. I can't imagine that. I mean, I've lived here all my life. It's hard for me to be able to put myself in that place and understand that and get that feeling of what that means and the opportunity that exists.
Yeah.
So I know in today's world, things are a little contentious.
Correct.
With this. So going to the other side, not somebody who's necessarily going through it.
Yeah.
But somebody who's just against it.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that? From your experiences, from your current position, how would you respond to somebody who's against it and says, they all deserve to go back? How would you?
I would probably encourage them to move beyond the political talking points. I would also encourage them to focus on people. I would encourage them to even look at it as a missional opportunity.
Okay.
Praying together. If it's funny, but Lifeway made a poll and they say that 50% of self-called evangelical Christians considered this immigration climate an opportunity for missional. 50%, wow. They don't consider it as an opportunity. They overpassed it. And so even to think about, is God allowing me to work with this person to be able to share the gospel? Maybe in their country it's illegal to, and a lot of them are refugees. And so maybe it's illegal to speak about Jesus in a country where you cannot. And now you're in an open country where, we have the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. And so having the opportunity and seeing that as an opportunity to be able to engage with that conversation. One of the things I would also encourage them is to learn about the immigration laws and engage with the immigration organizations, advocate about the compassion policies. And also, I think more than anything is, I feel Jesus did that, and I think that's why he's so relatable to us. He incarnated, right? He wasn't God. He wasn't God in the heavens. He became the God in this earth.
Right.
And he became that incarnation God. And so he knows our sin and he knows our struggles because he lived in this country. He lives in this world and walked and understood our struggles. The beautiful thing about it is that he didn't sin, but he knows. And even Paul says, hey, come to the throne of grace, for he understands us. And so I feel that sometimes we become like, we look at the policies and the climate through a lens instead of through a touch.
Okay. And I like that. I like that a lot. And feeling what's going on versus just seeing. And usually it's what somebody else is telling you to see. I like that. Well, to give you the opportunity, I'm going to open the door. What do you have anything you want to hit while we're in here before we wrap it all up?
Well, I think part of the conversation is opening the space to beyond the title or the struggle or even the sin that they're going through. How do I make the space to sit with them, to have this conversation,
right? To
know their story, and even to see it as an opportunity to present Jesus to their lives. And a lot of them have, a lot of the immigrant community do come from a very strong Christian background, but there's a lot that don't, right? A couple of years ago, we had a big group of, I think it was Middle Eastern population that came in.
Okay.
And so I know that there's opportunities for us. And sometimes what happens is we categorize and we think immigration, we think, oh, Latinos, but in reality, immigration is all around, right? We're getting all types of people from all types of life. And I think taking away the words of what I feel they are categorized with, how do I know them? How do I invite them? How do I get to know what they're going through? And then how do I learn from them? Having an open-minded and just seeing Jesus in their lives and saying, how can I share Jesus to you? And so I just want to invite everyone, don't manage just one lens, manage both. And even if you have a tensions are good because that means that you're trying to fulfill, how do I obey the rule of law, but how am I moved through the lens of biblical perspective and principles of loving my neighbor and loving thy neighbor like you love yourself. And so even if you see immigrants as enemies in the Sermon on the Mount, God said, love your enemies.
He did. That's great. That is Pastor Saul, thank you for coming.
Man, thank you.
I appreciate it a lot. For those of you that are listening to this, I looked on YouTube. There were comments. There were likes. I don't know what to do. I'm so excited. I can't even control myself. So take time. If you've enjoyed this, share it with your friends, share it with your neighbors. Just use this as a tool to open the conversation about what's going on in our world and how, as Christians, we can facilitate God's word reaching everybody. Thank you for coming today.
Gracias.
I appreciate it. And we will see you all soon.
Adios.
Thank you for listening to Collision. This podcast is a production of Crossroads Church in Thornton, Colorado. For more excellent content, please visit crossroadsabc.com.